Okay, cool. So it's 5 past now, so a kick-off. Thanks for joining today, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about migrating from WebLogic to the Payara platform, and we're really lucky to have one of our customers, some people who've done it, joining us, as well as Steve, our CEO and founder, who's going to be talking about why you might make that decision. So I'll pass over to Steve in a second, but just to say that the chat function's enabled. If you've got any issues with seeing the webinar, you can post your questions there, and you can also post your questions in the Q&A function. And if you post questions throughout the chat, we'll just save them to the end, and then we'll pose them to the team. So if you stick around to the end, we'll ask your questions. And without further ado, I'll pass to Steve.
Okay, thank you, Priya. So I'm Steve Millidge. I'm the CEO of Payara. I also have a product and CTO hat. So today we're talking around why you might migrate from WebLogic to Payara Server, and we have a business, why that's a smart business decision, and we're talking through a case study here with one of our customers, CDL. So we're very thankful for having them here to share their expertise. So this webinar today is really looking at a real-world example of Cheshire Data Systems Limited. They're insurance tech leaders in the UK. They have a system that was originally built on WebLogic, and they migrated that over to Payara. And they'll give you the detail about how they did that, why they did that, the technical details of that as well. I'll talk first around why you might want to migrate and why Payara is a good solution for you to migrate to from a WebLogic platform. Then we'll hear the details of the real-world migration, and then I'll talk a little bit about next steps and how Payara can help you if you decide to follow the same path. So these are some of the problems that people talk to us about as Payara with WebLogic, and these are some of the reasons that we get given from customers why they want to move from a WebLogic platform to the Payara platform. So we get told quite a lot that WebLogic currently, has quite slow releases. It has a slow release train. Releases aren't very often. And that can impact, innovation and capability and adoption of industry standards. For example, WebLogic doesn't have any microprofile support. It also is quite late in adopting Jakarta E standards. Payara 6 currently is Jakarta E10, which is the next generation of Jakarta EE, and that came out at the same time as the Jakarta E standard was released. So we're very committed to following standards closely and rapidly. We also, one of the things that we also get raised, and we'll look at this in a bit more detail, is around clustering. Payara has more clustering options around how you can do clustering. It has an embedded data grid, which we'll talk about. In WebLogic, there's an option to use coherence as an embedded data grid, but that's additional cost and an additional licensing. Again, many people talk to us around how difficult it is to trace or track or track down issues within WebLogic. Also, how difficult it can be to use WebLogic in a sort of fat jar or hollow jar, potentially, targeting at container environments and building containers that embed WebLogic. So we'll explore that a little bit, what Payara does. And then similarly on the adoption and the releases, how quick it is to adopt the latest JDKs. It can be problematic for some of our customers. And then obviously the big one, the final one, which is how much WebLogic can cost. It can have very high license costs, and sometimes the license model doesn't fit with the deployment model, especially in environments like cloud. And so we'll explore how we solve that problem with Payara. So first, before we dive into that, why should you choose Payara as a partner for your future application development, or from your migration, if you choose to migrate from a WebLogic platform? First and foremost, Payara are basically first for Jakarta developers. Where we want to be is we're a Jakarta compliant company. We're completely committed to Jakarta EE, and we're committed to driving the Jakarta standards. And we want to position ourselves as the first choice if you're a Jakarta developer and you're building Jakarta EE applications. So Payara is a founding member of the Jakarta working group. We are strategic members of the Jakarta working group alongside Oracle, IBM, Fujitsu, Tommy Tribe, and Microsoft now, and Red Hat. And so we are there in that working group. That working group defines the standards and the next generation of standards, and we are there wanting to commit and deliver those standards in a rapid fashion and rapidly into the Payara platform. So we're very much committed to be first for Jakarta developers. So also from a Payara perspective, we want to be a solid platform for mission critical applications. So whether you're building monolith applications, whether you're building microservices, whether you're building a hybrid, whether you're on cloud or whether you're building on VMs or on bare metal, then we want to have runtimes that support your deployment architectures. And we recognize that when you build applications on a Jakarta platform and you choose an application server, then that application server has to deliver on the non-functionals as well. So it has to be fast, it has to be secure, it has to be scalable, and it has to be high availability. And we focus heavily on building those capabilities for you. And similarly to that, we also focus on taking Jakarta forward. So Jakarta as a standard has been around a long time. It's been around since Java EE days, almost 20 years. And a lot has changed in that period of time. So from an infrastructure and architecture point of view, there's been a lot of changes. So we've gone from bare metal servers in data centers through to virtualization, into containers, and then into cloud orchestration, public cloud and container orchestration capabilities like Kubernetes or Fargate or Azure Container Service or something like that. All of these are runtimes and a massive revolution in software-defined infrastructure. And one of the key targets when we're building future releases of Payara Platform is to make sure that you as a developer can use these different infrastructures and that we abstract these things away, as we'll see on the next slide. Similarly, our job is also to make sure that we move forward the standards. We are, as I said in the previous slide, members of Jakarta EE. We're also members of the Microprofile Working Group. So the Microprofile Working Group builds APIs specifically targeted for microservices architectures. So it has APIs for health check, for fault tolerance, for metrics, and basically things that are targeted on microservices platforms. But we also want to make runtimes that can work on very small infrastructure for like IoT edge platforms as well. And overall, our biggest philosophy at Jakarta at Payara is that you should be able to write a Jakarta application and deploy it onto many different types of infrastructure. So the creators of Java EE back in the day did a very clever thing. They separated the role of deployment from the role of the runtime. And that enables us to build solutions and platforms that can scale from IoT edge devices with Payara Micro through standard server deployments using the DAS, so the domain model that you would get in a traditional WebLogic application server or Payara application server, through to we are creating new innovative runtimes like Payara Cloud, which is effectively a Kubernetes native application server. So it basically sits on top of Kubernetes and abstracts away all the complexity of Kubernetes, and you just deploy an application. And all that's possible through the Jakarta model. And essentially what Payara is doing is we're exploiting that Jakarta model to give you the best runtime that can scale from small to hyperscale cloud, and that can deliver the non-functionals that you need and the insights that you need when developing Jakarta applications. So we'll talk about the problems that most people report to us when they're thinking about moving to WebLogic, and I'll dive a little bit into each one and basically tell you how Payara resolves that problem. So if we take so the ability for WebLogic, the WebLogic being slow to release new features and capabilities. So when we created Payara in 2016, we adopted a monthly release strategy. So we release Payara every single month through community and through enterprise. And the reason to do that is that we can get capabilities into developer hands rapidly. We can rapidly track the all the different standards as they evolve, and we can basically make sure we update to the latest JDKs and update to the latest operating systems and ensure that our release cadence is quick. So the whole of our engineering team is geared around a monthly release strategy to make sure that new capabilities are delivered regularly. There is a split between Payara Community and Payara Enterprise. So Payara Community is a release that is fully open source, and that delivers new capabilities very quickly. So it's more suited for development environments. We try things out. We will try the new standards, etc., in community first, and when we think they are ready for prime time mission critical enterprise deployment, and then those features will migrate into the Payara Enterprise product. So the Payara Enterprise product receives those capabilities when they are ready and tested, and we're happy to support them onto mission critical environments. And again, Payara Enterprise releases on a monthly basis and tries to follow a semantic versioning methodology. So you should know whether you can upgrade and get the latest fixes and security updates through minor releases. WebLogic takes a long time to support standards. So Payara, the Payara Server and Payara team were at the forefront of these standards, and the regular release cadence enables us to deliver those quickly. For example, Jakarta 10, which is a big breaking change, was released in October, and at the same time we released Payara Community. As I said, Payara Community is mainly suited for experimentation and development, and we released that in October at the same time as the Jakarta 10 standards release. So we track very closely what's happening in standards. Similarly, Microprofile 6 will come out in the next month, and we will deliver that in community first in the first quarter, and then both of these will rotate and move into enterprise when we think these are ready for prime time and ready for enterprise deployments for mission critical environments. So one of the big things that we do is track the standards very closely, and that allows us to influence the standards, allows us to ensure that AR implementations are compatible rapidly. The other thing Payara embeds within it is a data grid. So rather than using Oracle Coherence, which is additional product cost, or you need to use WebLogic Suite, Payara Server has an inbuilt data grid. The difference between a data grid and a cluster is that data grid provides lots of different deployment topologies. So Payara data grid enables you to just dynamically add and remove nodes. It allows you to configure the level of replicas. It also, we built the Payara data grid as the backing clustering technology to make sure it runs quite easily on public cloud and things like that, where networking capabilities like multicast don't exist. So we have built it so out of the box, it can do node discovery in cloud environments. Payara data grid typically will do node discovery through the domain admin server. So that enables you to, to add and remove nodes via containers or through VMs, elastic VMs, or in capabilities like Kubernetes, we have connectors that will use Kubernetes service names to create clusters. So we feel our clustering capabilities are a lot more flexible, a lot more powerful than is currently available in WebLogic. We've also built a lot of capabilities into Payara around determining what's going on in applications. Again, one of our core beliefs is that the reason that you would reuse Jakarta EE and Payara as an application runtime is that separation of deployment from runtime enables us as a runtime to gather information about what is going in your application and surface that information into you as developer or as into operations teams. So we have capabilities around we have basic monitoring like WebLogic does, but we also have higher level tracing. So we have something called request tracing, which can be configured to detect if a request through the server, like a REST request or HTTP request, servlet request, exceeds some threshold, and we can track what happened within the server. So which beans it called, whether there was an external call, etc. Similarly, through SQL, we can detect if a SQL query exceeds a threshold, and you can surface that out through Payara Insight to give you information about what occurred. And a lot of our future roadmap is around building that out to deliver intelligent insights to operations teams and development teams. Because as a Jakarta runtime, we can know what your application is trying to achieve. And another addition from Payara Platform is Payara Micro. So Payara Micro allows you to package a full Jakarta runtime with your application into either a fat jar, which is like a Spring Boot application, essentially, a single jar file that you just execute on the command line, or as a hollow jar, which is basically the WAR file sits on top of the runtime, which is good for container environments. So we can package that up as a single entity that can then sit in a container. So the advantages of this from a container perspective when building container images is that the Payara micro layer will change very, very, very infrequently, whereas the WAR file layer can change frequently as you do development, and that allows your container images to be smaller. And as you do more rapid turnaround of development, then you're only changing a very small layer. But Payara Micro is also built from the ground up to be container native. So unlike the Payara Server, which has a domain admin server, Payara Micro does peer-to-peer type clustering. Uses the same data grid technology, the same Jakarta runtime, but there's no controlling administration server. So it's expected to be a peer-to-peer cluster, a peer-to-peer container with some external orchestrator. So Payara Micro gives you capabilities that you can't get using the WebLogic platform. So just to summarize that in a table, Payara Server Enterprise 5 is released monthly. It has production support, and it has some similar capabilities like WebLogic does around recording commands in WebLogic. That'd be WST. In Payara, it's ASAdmin commands. But then we have additional capabilities related to microservices. We have microprofile support. And you also, similar to WebLogic, where you will get JDK support, Payara comes with JDK support. So we have JDK support through our partnership with Azul. We offer the Azul JVM as a fully supported platform. And so you can raise JDK tickets if they are running on Azul. But at the same time, we don't mandate that. You can choose, and we support many different Java versions, including ARM versions like Corretto, and we support OpenJDK and the Eclipse working group that delivers OpenJDK builds. We support their builds as well. as a runtime for Payara. So Payara has a different commercial model to WebLogic. And this is one of the key aspects that we see where people come to migrate. So Payara has a subscription model. So you purchase a subscription, which is annual. We have 24/7, 10x5 options. And our pricing is per core. So, and that can be a virtual core, or it can be a physical core. And whichever way that works out best for you, you can choose whether to license for physical core or for virtual core. We don't have any special cloud licensing, like some of the issues that I sometimes see with licensing Oracle WebLogic, in that, we don't make you count all physical processes supporting a virtual environment. And we don't have upfront license. We don't split between license fee and maintenance fees like you do with a WebLogic purchase. So all our subscriptions are annual, and that includes software maintenance as well as support and updates. And we are completely open source, so you can have the source code of Payara Enterprise. As I mentioned, data grid is included. It's not a coherent extra. And again, we support the JDK, and you get that support alongside our model, our enterprise subscription. So some things that people have noticed and reported to us after migrating to Payara, we have very good server stability. We have very low levels of issues on production. And one of our customers reported 5 nines availability on their Payara clusters. We customers see a big reduction in resource consumption when compared to other servers. We've tried to make the resource consumption of the core application server to be very low. Payara Micro, for instance, uses tens of megabytes of heap out the box, the JVM heap. We can have commercial options where they are unlimited for very large, or all you can eat based on the number of, your expectation over a period of subscription of how many cores you'll be using, so that you can add more without complexity or, changing your subscription level. And that is individually negotiated depending on, the level that you expect. Payara came from Glassfish, so it was the reference implementation of Jakarta EE. So typically there's a pretty easy migration path from applications. We have some proprietary APIs, but we don't have a lot. So most of the capabilities we have are the Jakarta EE standards. So if you're very closely following Jakarta EE standards, it's very typical to be quite easy to migrate. Many people tell us that Payara feels like a much more modern application server. Payara also is very powerful at configuration, so it has full scripting. You can completely software define and script an installation of Payara. If you don't know how to, we have in the domain admin server, in the admin console, you can switch on recording and you can see what commands the admin console is using. It has a full REST management interface. So the admin console calls into the REST management interface, and that can be used as well. And typically in Payara, there's a big reduced cost if you're migrating from a WebLogic platform in the equivalent Payara platform from a license fee perspective. So Payara as a company, we've been going since 2016. The platform itself has been growing rapidly. We've been growing 140% year on year from a customer perspective. And we have 88,000 monthly Payara installations. So we track as far as we can how many people are using Payara products and community installations as well. And typically it's around 88,000 a month unique installations. We are a very stable company in that we are 100% funded by our customers. So we're profitable, funded by our enterprise subscriptions, and very focused on keeping and retaining customers. And we have very strong retention growth metrics as well. The Payara team is global, so we're a remote-first organization. We have many languages spoken. We have people in many different time zones. So we're a global, remote-first organization. We're growing rapidly, but we're growing in a sustainable manner using customer funds and customer revenues to keep the team going. And we're also small enough to be agile, small enough to listen to what our customers want, and small enough to adapt our feature set based on feedback that we get. So we want to be first for Jakarta EE. So we're always open to feedback from customers about how we can improve, make their life easier, and deliver improvements to the platform. And you get that because we are a small agile team. So we work completely across the world. We have customers in all continents, including Australia, even though there's not an orange blob on this picture. We have Australian customers as well. We are across all sectors. We have customers in hospitality, in finance, in advanced manufacturing, obviously insurance, SaaS, and on-premise. We have people in automotive. So because of the horizontal nature of a Jakarta server, we have big customers across all the different verticals, including some central banks and those sort of things. So we work with very large organizations. They do very large deployments, and they do mission critical deployments. So you probably heard too much from me. So I'll pass over to the team from CDL, and they can tell us about their experience of migrating from WebLogic to Payara. So,
thanks, Steve.
I'll stop sharing.
Yes, thank you. Right, I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully you guys can all see that now.
That's good.
Excellent. Okay. So hello and welcome to this webinar, which will be about CDL's journey from WebLogic to Payara. You'll be hearing from myself, Ross McDonald, Software Engineering Manager, today, along with Eric Healy and Andy Brown. They're also joining us on the call that you'll see here. I'll be touching on the history behind CDL and why it made sense to business to move from WebLogic to Payara. Eric will be touching on the technical reasons, and Andy will be touching on the operational reasons. So firstly, I suppose, who are CDL? CDL was founded in 1977, for those you didn't know. We have over 500 employees in total, and is a software development house which is located in South Manchester. Some of you may have driven past our offices before when travelling around on the M60 ring road around Manchester. Our offices are located just next to the Pyramid building that you'll see on your way past. One of those iconic buildings Steve had on his slides there at the beginning, which is the Codeworks. We build enterprise global insurance solutions covering many aspects of the insurance requisition journey. This includes integrating with aggregators, handling broker operations, such as creating a policy, doing midterm adjustments, or taking a payment. We also integrate with the underlying insurers to let them know of any policies that the broker has wrapped up during the day, which then basically marks that person as insured with that insurer. We also have several user-facing portals, which we build and maintain for our brokers, so that customers can self-serve their insurance policies through the broker's website. So now let's take a look at just how many migrations we've done from WebLogic to Payara across our environments in total. So we've done 155, circa around that amount, Payara migrations since committing to this journey back in March 2020. March 2020 is when the discovery started for the project. So not too long ago, really. And that's when the dream started becoming a reality. 15 months passed by, and then we were ready for our first client production migration. Roll forwards another 13 months, And we had all of the environments migrated from WebLogic to Payara. It's also worth noting that during this transition, we also completed 2 other moves, that being from Oracle to Postgres, and on-premise, from our on-premise data centers to AWS. This involved the full 250 people across software engineering to make that happen, along with the careful planning and efforts from other areas of the business as well. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, why did we go to this effort? Well, one of the big business drivers for moving from Payara to WebLogic was the need to drive down the cost, increase flexibility, allow an element of platform choice, and for the offering to provide multi-node support. Also, with what that brings is resilience to our clients as standard. Keeping on our previous setup and achieving all of the above came at an increased cost, basically. And given our appetite to grow, we wanted to ensure that the business offering remained competitive proposition for our customers. This is where Payara ticked all the boxes for us. It allowed us to move to a cost-effective model where all customers could afford to run a resilient system fit for today's always-on world. We had the flexibility around the environments and how many of those we could provision at a cost which was attractive. We had the choice of platform. So using AWS, we had no issue getting the framework and surrounding infrastructure spun up. We could be scalable on demand when our customers really needed it by having the ability to have multi-node support at a competitive price. These are all the 4 reasons why we're here today using Payara for our insurance solutions. So what I'll do now is I'll pass over to Eric, who will give us some technical reasons behind why the move to Payara worked for us.
Thanks, Ross. Hi, everyone. My name's Eric Healy, and I'm the technical delivery lead for one of the development squads in CDL. So our squad's remit was to be able to deploy and run our Strat application, an EJB application on Payara, and to create a smooth developer experience of spinning up a local environment to aid in development and testing. I'd like to just give you a quick high-level overview, really, of some of the main steps we went through during our migration from WebLogic to Payara. We initially went through a phase of bringing our code base up to JE7 standards, which included reviewing and rationalizing code for items, including the managed executors, which we required for concurrent calls to various peripheral services, batch API, the timer service. We currently use a Quartz implementation for some of our scheduled processes. We then moved on to removing some WebLogic specific code that we had embedded in our code base. An example of this was in relation to the managed executor services I just mentioned. We were using WebLogic work managers, which strictly are not part of the JE specification, and thus we swapped them out for the managed executor service. In terms of our migration journey, our first cut involved installing and running a single Payara domain admin server on a VM using VirtualBox. This was configured via Vagrant. This allowed us to concentrate on becoming familiar with the Payara as admin commands and setting up the server using resources such as the Payara online knowledge base. As an aside, as Steve mentioned before, we did actually find the Payara, the as admin recorder, extremely useful as part of that. It was used a lot of the time, certainly throughout our initial phase. Once we had a running DAS that we could deploy to, we looked to set up a clustered environment. This was achieved by a fairly simple process of setting up other VMs as Payara SSH nodes, each operating as part of a single Payara deployment group managed by the Payara data grid. So with both our eyes firmly pretty much fixed on the cloud, we then switched tack and we concentrated on containerizing the DAS and instance nodes using the Payara provided Payara image, which we wrapped in our Docker file and configured accordingly, given what we'd learned earlier from the VM phases. It was reasonably straightforward after that to then spin up multiple containers on the same Docker network with the clusters instances, taking advantage of the Payara post boot scripts to announce themselves back to the DAS and thus be added to the deployment group. And finally, in order to smooth out the developer experience, we built some custom Gradle tasks to interact with Docker via a Java Docker library. So pretty much as of today, for a developer to run a local Payara cluster, it's as simple as the command you see there on the screen with the Gradle instances equals 3 deploy Strata. That will spin up a three node Payara cluster. We have a full Jenkins build, component, integration, test pipelines, all controlled by Gradle and spinning up the Payara containers as and when required. So a little bit about our journey working with Payara. So throughout our journey, basically, we've worked very closely with the Payara guys in order to ensure a smooth transition from WebLogic to Payara. And this has included continuing communication, both via the provided Payara forums, but also face-to-face. We had a 3-day visit from one of the senior Payara staff, where our implementation from both an application and server setup point of view was reviewed. At the end of those 3 days, we got a comprehensive review document with that produced, and it details suggested changes to both some of our code and also the Payara configuration settings. The review was extremely valuable and helps us to prepare for our rollout into production and highlighted areas that we could potentially look at in the future. Today, we pretty much continue that iterative process, and we're currently working closely with the Payara guys to propose new functionality, which, for example, makes integration into services such as AWS easy for all. One example being the message-driven beans integration with SQS. Finally, looking ahead, our application currently uses InfiniSpan libraries for server-side replicated caching throughout the cluster, but we will be looking at swapping that out for Hazelcast, which comes as an integral part of the Payara system. So it was very high level that. There was a quick journey through some of the high level things we did, but I'll now hand over to Andy and he can discuss go through the rollout into production.
Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy, and I'm the lead DevOps engineer for insurance retail at CDL. When looking at our Strata application deployments in UAT and production, one of the things that we liked about Payara was the support for environment variables in the domain and instance configuration. So we use this for our JDBC and JMS configurations to Postgres database and currently Amazon MQ instances. This allows us to keep our container images free of any specific configuration for clients or environment, which in turn means that we can keep our container image tagging policy limited to the Strata versions. From an architectural point of view, we want to keep things running in the foreground and follow a container best practice of one process per container. So when we use Payara, we keep each container running a single JVM, and then we have an additional container to run the domain admin server or the DAS. One of the benefits that we reaped and decided upon early was to roll out clustering for all our production environments, as well as some UAT environments for all of our clients. Previously in WebLogic land, only certain of our clients would get the benefits of a clustered solution, and this was mostly based on around the licensing model. We also combined the ease of using the data grid for clustering with Amazon Web Services, and that brought our number of resilient production environments from 2 to over 30. The data grid itself makes it easy to add more instances to a cluster if required, and we can do this on the fly if clients see a sudden influx of traffic that's brought on by external sources. So what did our typical WebLogic deployments look like? Although most of our deployments on WebLogic were on-prem, we did have a couple of clients in AWS, so we can use these as an example. The standard offering was a single EC2 running 4 JVMs, the admin server, and then a JVM per application. So we have Strata, which is our server-side application, and then Echelon, which is our web front-end client, and SI, which is our SOAP/API client. All of these JVMs are housed on a single EC2, so we have no resilience. Furthermore, we're unable to do any application level health checks because we're still really dealing with a pets not cattle strategy here. If we terminate an EC2 due to a failing application health check, we bring all the applications down. For enterprise, our enterprise clients do get some clustering. Here we move to multiple EC2 model. Each EC2 will run the same 3 JVMs. However, they're all configured to share EJB and REST calls with the other EC2 instances. So whilst this does provide some resilience, we're not able to scale up easily to match sudden influxes of traffic. One EC2 is also determined as the cluster master. This instance also runs the admin server. The domain's then packed, exported to EFS, which the other 2 nodes can read upon startup. But as previously mentioned, this model requires more licensing from Oracle. So how does this look when we use Payara? As we move to a container-based model with Payara, we use Amazon ECS service with Fargate and deploy each application, both the client and the server ones, as a separate container with the JVM in the foreground. The DAS is also deployed here as a separate container. All clients are deployed as a cluster. So for us, it's simply a case of picking the best t-shirt size in terms of how many nodes they get. We've got a minimum of 3, so we can utilize AWS's availability zones for maximum resilience. Each server instance has a short startup script to register in the DAS. We use config nodes. These nodes are then added to the data grid and the deployment group within the Payara domain. On the networking side, we've got 2 listeners within the instance config. So we need to make these available. EJB clients need to use the IOP listener. So we make that available by a host name / IP address, utilizing Amazon's Cloud Map service, which gives us a DNS address for each strata node. So you can see here at the bottom, it's the, in this example, insurance retail 1-strata-1.dev.domain. And for 2, it's -2, for 3, it's -3. For the HTTP listeners, we use a fairly standard setup of an application load balancer and a target group. So depending on which method the client application uses to call the server, we've got both routes covered. And that was pretty much our journey. So that's all from me. I'll hand back over to Steve for a short wrap up.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll just share my screen. Okay, thanks for that. And thanks for coming on the webinar. It's really interesting. It's interesting for me because I think that's one of the first times I've seen the architecture. And it's good to see that, you know, our capabilities, which capability you used. And from my perspective, from the team, I've noted you've migrated so many things across, but you know, as a CEO, CTO, I've actually not had a lot of problems, if you like, raised up to our level to fix. So it seems to be, from my perspective, pretty smooth process. So just to wrap up, you know, if migration is the right option for you, if you're a WebLogic customer currently, is moving to Payara a good option? So I would say it's a good option, you know, if you want to have peace of mind that there's a great future for your applications and Jakarta EE with a vendor that is, you know, sticking to Jakarta EE and is first for Jakarta EE, then Payara is a good choice. If you want to track, you know, the latest standards, you need to keep up to date with the latest Java versions, latest operating systems, and database support and those things, then we're very much focused on ensuring that our runtime is up to date and tracking all the standards and infrastructure that comes along. And also, where a lot of our roadmap is around building capabilities so that you can understand what is going wrong, or if there's issues in production in your applications. You know, we're leveraging the separation from deployment, application deployment WAR file from the application runtime, which is Payara. Then we want to build on that to give more and more capabilities to the developer and operations teams about what is happening, and visibility and insights into what's happening within the runtime. So if you need that, then Payara is a good choice. It's also smart from a business decision. So obviously we've seen a lot of decisions around WebLogic, architectural decisions often in WebLogic, what we've seen in customers, are decided by licensing. So whether to cluster, whether to run resilience, or whether to have data grids, a lot of those decisions are made not by the architecture or the technical needs, but actually by the cost. So architecting for cost is a lot. We see a lot with WebLogic, which you won't get with Payara. We do charge per core, but we're nowhere near making you architect your solution based on how many cores you're likely to have to pay for. Payara, we're there for the future-proof your applications. So we want and we track the latest JDKs, latest Jakarta EE, etc. But we're also building tooling to help you migrate. So Jakarta 10 is a breaking change. We are building tooling to move Jakarta 8 and applications to the new namespace. But at the same time, we are supporting Payara 5 and Jakarta 8. We have a 10-year software lifecycle, so there's many years to enable you to do that migration. But we're there to provide tooling, upgrade tools, and application upgrade tools to help that, to future-proof what you're doing. And as I said, from a runtime perspective, we want to build more efficient monitoring. We want to build and enable better application performance. We want to enable the runtime to give you insights of what's occurring. And similarly, to make you enable you to use new capabilities like a new software-defined infrastructure like Fargate to help scale out, scale down, be elastic, and enable better application performance and scalability through the capabilities of the Payara platform. So the key benefits, I won't talk through all these as we spoke most of them, but one of the other things that has been mentioned is the ability to talk to Payara. Whereas for a small team, but not too small, we're about 40 people at the moment. We have a dedicated team, and it gives you the opportunity to go through Payara Server experts through the support model or through our consultancy services. There's not layers of support agents to get through before you can get an answer to your questions. So you will have very quickly connected to Payara Server experts. And finally, how can we help? So we have a number of customers that have done this. CGL, as you've just seen, have done this successfully and migrated all those environments through to Payara. We have other customers that have done the same. So we have consultancy services under a brand called Payara Accelerator, and they're there to help you accelerate your deployment, your migration from WebLogic to Payara. We have consultants that have experience in WebLogic, and they know how to move things to Payara, and they know where, what the mapping is from WebLogic specific capabilities and how you can re-implement those on the Payara platform or through Jakarta in a more standard way. So we can help with that. We have some guides. So we have some migration guides. If you want to get an evaluation of the Payara Enterprise software, then you can reach out and we can give you that as well. Alongside the guides, we can assist through any project. We have something called migration and project support, which is a low-cost support model, which is available before you have any Payara in production. So it's a fixed price licensing model whereby it covers your development environments and doesn't for a fixed price, and that can be tailored and combined with accelerator services and support services to help through the migration. So I think that's all we have. Priya, have we got any questions?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Steve and CDL team, for such a thorough, insightful webinar. I put in the chat all those links for those migration resources Steve just mentioned, and also to contact us. So yeah, any questions, please do share them in the chat or in the Q&A function. We've got a couple of minutes, but I thought just to kick us off, Steve, I'd ask, you touched on how Payara is open source. What about if a company's procurement team is skeptical about open source? Can you kind of expand on what that means for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's, to be honest, open source is pretty embedded now in the enterprise. From a procurement perspective, we are a enterprise-friendly license. It's the same license that Sun used to resell software on, so it's a CDDL license version 2. It's not a a viral license, so there's going to be no risk to build applications or anything on the Payara platform. It can be dual licensed if required. One of the advantages of being open source is that you can also get the source code from of Payara Enterprise. So from that gives you one peace of mind that the source is available and can be built if that's important to you. Second, it also enables easier debugging and fixing and things like that if you've got the source code, because you can dig around. There's no need to do things like decompilation or anything that may breach any license rules. There's nothing there. It's very open from that perspective.
Great. And another question, I think CDL briefly mentioned the bundled Azul supported JVM. Can you expand on kind of what you gain from that?
Yeah, basically the main gain is, one, you get their enterprise JVM, but two, you can raise JVM level issues. So not like issues with Payara, but if you see problems within the JVM itself, or if we see problems in the JVM itself, then we actually have support to fix that as well. So, and similarly, if there are JVM security issues, 0 days or things like that, then we get notifications from Azul, and they get sent and available to customers immediately, and updates on the JVM itself will be available to customers.
Okay, that's great. So I think we're coming up on the hour. If there's any more questions that aren't coming through in the chat, I think we'll wrap up if that's okay with everyone. So I've put some links there, as I mentioned, and we'll be sharing the recording round. Thank you so much again, CDL, for joining us. That was a really great session, and thank you everyone who's joined to watch today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
It's been great to have you with us, and yeah, attendees, keep an eye on your emails, because we'll be sending around more useful links and a recording of the webinar. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.